So Jared Anderson gets the rude awakening that many Brits were predicting. Not myself, but many other Brits were predicting, being stopped in 5 rounds by Martin Bakole. Let's talk about it. Both fighters showed their strengths and weaknesses. Yes, even Bakole showed technical flaws in this fight. Flaws which Michael Hunter exploited all those years ago and which future Bakole opponents will be looking to exploit as well. I did a breakdown of his and Anderson's mistakes and flaws in this hour-long film study of the fight, which I just uploaded to my Patreon page. But of course, it was Jared Anderson's flaws which proved to be most critical in this particular instance. This was always a fascinating matchup to me because you had Bakole, the bigger, stronger, more experienced guy, going up against the younger, faster, more athletic Jared Anderson. Now, I mentioned pre-fight that Anderson typically has an even higher work rate than Martin Bakole. And of course, Anderson normally being very high volume, that's predicated on him either not getting hit much or at least not being hurt when he does get hit. Because he got hurt at the end of that first round, it brought his volume down lower than we normally see from him. And that, of course, gave Martin Bakole the advantage. I thought that Bakole would need to be a bit crafty in the fight. He'd need to set traps and catch Anderson with shots. And that's actually what we saw in the first round because Anderson made the brighter start. He was clearly the faster of the two. He was popping his jab. He was switching from southpaw to orthodox. He was peppering Martin Bakole with shots. But all the while, Bakole looked imposing. He had this very confident, kind of intimidating look on his face while Anderson was doing his work. He had his left hand down and he was moving around slowly. You know, he did look kind of ponderous, Martin Bakole, with his big Santa belly. But towards the end of the round, Bakole found the opportunity he was looking for. Anderson has always had somewhat of a leaky defense, and Bakole was able to time him with some shots, which hurt Anderson. And this was another crucial thing in the fight. Bakole was always going to get through, because as I say, Anderson's always had a leaky defense. And Bakole's defense wasn't great either, by the way. He was getting caught with plenty of shots. The difference being, Bakole's chin was able to compensate for his leaky defense, whereas Anderson's chin was not. And the first time Bakole got through with some big shots, Anderson was in trouble, and down he went towards the end of the first round. And to be honest, it looked right there like the writing was on the wall. I thought Martin Bakole was going to come out in the second round and probably finish the job. Because when Anderson got off the canvas, he did have that kind of deer in the headlights look about him. Like he was shocked that this had happened. But to his credit, Anderson came out in the second round and he tried to fight fire with fire. He showed he had heart. He showed he was still there to win. He didn't panic. He tried to get back on his jab. And he was having some success, actually. But that's when Martin Bakole uncorked his jab. And of course, it's a very long jab. And so where Anderson was actually having the better of it on the outside in the first round, once Martin Bakole got his jab going, there was nowhere for Jared Anderson to hide. So even on the outside, he was getting hit with that ramrod jab. Don't get me wrong, Anderson was still having moments of success. He was definitely catching Martin Bakole with clean shots, but nothing was bothering Martin Bakole, at least not to the head. I think some of the body shots affected Martin Bakole a little bit because Anderson was switching upstairs, downstairs, and some of them body shots I think maybe took the wind out of him momentarily. But in terms of the headshots, nothing bothered Martin Bakole at all. And as I say, his jab was really starting to become a factor in the fight as the rounds went on. Anderson, from memory at least, was doing okay in the fifth, but then he got caught with a monumental uppercut from Martin Bakole, and down he went again. Tremendous shot. He did get to his feet, but he looked in all sorts of trouble. The referee let it go on. Martin Bakole stepped in and finished the fight. So it was a very exciting fight while it lasted. Very entertaining spectacle. I definitely feel like I got my money's worth on that one. It was better than the Andy Ruiz-Jarrell Miller fight. Not that the Andy Ruiz-Jarrell Miller fight was bad, but it was more of a grueling fight, right? And after a while, you realize that neither guy had the power to knock the other one out because they both had great chins. Whereas with Bakole and Anderson, the power was there, certainly from Bakole, and the vulnerability was there for Anderson in terms of punch resistance and defense for us to get something really exciting, a knockout, which is what we got in the fifth. So great result for Martin Bakole. I'm certainly not shocked that he won. I said before the fight, even though I did pick Anderson to win, I said it would not shock me at all if Bakole won. I think I had it maybe like 55-45 in Anderson's favor or 60-40. I just felt like the youth and the speed of Anderson would be able to get the job done. But as we found out, he just didn't have the chin. So good result, good performance by Martin Bakole. Moving forward, I mean, even though Bakole won, he did well. It wasn't exactly a flawless performance. You know, as I say, his defense wasn't great. He was getting caught plenty in there and at times he looked very, very ponderous and slow. He does have some speed in short bursts, Martin Bakole, in terms of hand speed, but there was many occasions in this fight where he was very, very stationary and open to being hit. And while he managed to get away with that against Jared Anderson, with a more defensively responsible boxer who's going to use their speed and move their feet, you could see Bakole having problems. In fact, Michael Hunter was right there in attendance and he called for the rematch against Martin Bakole. So we'll see if that happens. Hunter has been in the wilderness for years, since the Povetkin fight really, and he hasn't been looking impressive. So I think a lot of people would be favouring Bakole in a rematch based on recent form. A lot of people would also be keen on seeing Martin Bakole fight Zheli Zhang. I think Eddie Hearn's called for that fight. That's an intriguing one because Zhang has got really bad stamina, but he's got tremendous punching power. And we know Bakole's got a good chin, but he's never been hit as hard as Zheli Zhang can hit him. So that's a very intriguing matchup. Martin Bakole versus Jarrell Miller. I'd love to see that. I was going to say the two winners of the heavyweight fights on this card, although Miller didn't win officially, it was a draw. Martin Bakole versus Filip Hrgović. That's a good one. So plenty of options for him. The secret, at least stateside, is now out because Martin Bakole has been very well known about on the UK boxing scene for a number of years now. His reputation has mainly been built on sparring stories, right? But we've seen him fight many times. The Americans, for the most part, hadn't seen Martin Bakole fight many times. In fact, I'm sure most Americans had never seen Martin Bakole fight before. They just looked at his BoxRec page and saw a stoppage defeat to Michael Hunter and thought there's no threat here for Jared Anderson. Certainly that's what Teddy Atlas was thinking. If you watched his podcast, he saw this as a foregone conclusion for Jared Anderson. He gave Martin Bakole no chance not only of winning, but of even testing Jared Anderson. Because as I've said in many videos in the past, there's this perception in the United States, and it still persists, that if you haven't won a big fight in the United States, then you can't be any good. Which is a very strange mentality to have, particularly in the heavyweight division, given the fact that the United States hasn't been at the top in the heavyweight division for several decades. It's been dominated by Europe. So for them to still have this mindset that you need to win big fights in the States to prove that you're any good, again, strange when it comes to heavyweights. It's actually more like the opposite. If you're an American heavyweight, you really need to fight in Europe to prove that you're any good, or to fight the top European fighters. And by European fighters, I'm including the top Brits in there. Martin Bakole, of course, is not a Brit, but he's based in Britain, has been for a number of years. His trainer-manager, Billy Nelson, is British. Now, as for Jared Anderson moving forward, can he come back from this? Well, Anderson showed a lot of heart in there, but his chin was shaky, and so he's really going to need to rethink his whole game. For many years now, most of us have been criticizing the lean back that he does. Rather than getting his feet out the way and getting his hands up, he tries to lean back from punches. Needs to stop doing that. Hopefully this result right here will be the catalyst that gets him to stop doing that and start tightening things up. He's young enough to come again. I think he's only, 24 years old? If the desire's there, he does have talent. He's fast, he's athletic, he can move, he can switch southpaw orthodox, go upstairs, downstairs. But he got a reality check here with regards to his chin. Because he would have known, of course, that he didn't have the greatest defense, right? He's been caught plenty of times in previous fights. But now he knows, without any shadow of a doubt, that he doesn't have a great chin. So he's going to need to rethink his style with a view to protecting that chin. And he's got tremendous fitness, Jared Anderson. So if he becomes a hit and hop it merchant, it might be able to work. Now, Martin Bakole suffered a similar setback himself in 2018 when he was beaten up and stopped in 10 rounds by a cruiserweight in Michael Hunter. And it really was a humiliating defeat, especially when you consider the fact that Bakole was fighting a much smaller man and that he actually attempted to quit on his stool in that fight. His trainer Billy Nelson had to literally beg him to continue. Now, of course, Bakole and his team and his fans have made a load of excuses for that loss. And perhaps Anderson will have some excuses for why he lost this fight. The point is, Bakole was able to put that loss behind him and bounce back. We'll now see if Anderson can respond to his first defeat in similar fashion. Let me know what you guys thought about this fight in the comments section below. I know many of you picked Martin Bakole, particularly those of you from the UK. A large percentage of British boxing fans were picking Bakole to win. You got it right. Let me know how far you think Bakole can go. Who else do you think you could beat in the heavyweight division? And what fight would you like to see him in next? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've just uploaded an in-depth film study of this fight to my Patreon page, where I analyze the actual footage and highlight the strengths and weaknesses that both fighters showed, technically, tactically, and physically. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours worth of other exclusive boxing content, as well as our members chat, just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store. All the links are in the description box below.